She said it in the kitchen, with the refrigerator humming behind her like a witness that refused to testify. "You're insecure," she yelled. "That's your problem. Not mine." It wasn't the volume that stunned me. It was the certainty. The way she said it, like a diagnosis, like she'd finally named the disease that explained everything wrong with us. Like she was the calm professional and I was the unstable patient refusing treatment. I remember looking down at my plate. Cold lasagna. The edges had dried into something chewy and sad. I'd reheated it twice already, more out of habit than hunger. She stood there with her arms crossed, already checked out of the conversation, already convinced she'd won. That was the night I realized how easy it is for someone to rewrite reality when they're desperate to escape it. Because I wasn't insecure. I was suspicious. And suspicion, I would later learn, is what people call insecurity when the truth threatens them. At the time, though, I didn't have language for that. All I had was a hollow feeling in my chest and the slow, humiliating awareness that my own marriage had become a courtroom where I was always the defendant. She had been building the narrative for months. Any question I asked was proof. Any concern I voiced was control. Any silence from her phone was work stress. Any distance between us was my fault. "You don't trust me," she'd say, shaking her head like a disappointed teacher. "You're projecting," she'd add, always calm, always righteous. "You need to work on yourself." That phrase, "work on yourself," became her shield. She used it when she came home late. She used it when she canceled plans. She used it when she stopped touching me altogether. And the more she said it, the smaller I felt. That's the part people don't talk about. How accusation, repeated often enough, begins to rot your self-image. How you start replaying conversations in your head, wondering if maybe you really are the problem. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe love really does require swallowing your instincts whole. I tried to fix myself. I read articles about communication. I gave her space. I apologized when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. I told myself marriage meant patience. What I didn't know was that patience, in the hands of someone dishonest, is just permission. The turning point came on a Tuesday. A hospital Tuesday. My phone rang at 3:17 p.m., an unfamiliar number flashing across the screen. I remember hesitating before answering, irritated at the interruption. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly numbers, my world still ran on logic then, still obeyed rules. "Is this Daniel Hart?" a woman asked. "Yes." "This is Mercy General. Your wife listed you as an emergency contact." The words after that blurred together. Minor accident. Observation. No immediate danger. I drove to the hospital in silence, rehearsing concern. Practicing forgiveness. Preparing to be the good husband she said I wasn't. I found her sitting upright in a bed, makeup flawless, phone in hand. She looked annoyed more than shaken. "You didn't answer my texts," she said before I could speak. I blinked. "I was in a meeting." "Are you okay?" She shrugged. "It's nothing. Honestly, you worry too much." That's when I noticed it. Her phone buzzed. She smiled. Not at me. At the screen. Then she turned it face down. Something inside me clicked, not loudly, not dramatically. More like a lock engaging. A final piece sliding into place. That night, when she accused me again, when she raised her voice and called me insecure in our kitchen, I stopped defending myself. I just listened. And for the first time, I heard the cracks in her confidence instead. As if repetition made them real. She guarded her phone like it held state secrets. Face down on every surface. Muted notifications. Bathroom breaks that stretched too long. When I asked about it, carefully, gently, she sighed. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. "You read into everything." So I stopped asking. Instead, I started watching. Patterns emerged when emotion stepped aside. Her expenses shifted. New clothes. New restaurants. Hair appointments that took all afternoon. She framed it as self-care, another buzzword she wielded like a moral high ground. "You wouldn't understand," she said once. "You're not exactly ambitious." That one stung. Not because it was true, but because of how casually cruel it was. I had built my career quietly, methodically. Finance wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I liked structure. I liked long games. I liked knowing exactly where leverage lived. She used to admire that. Now she treated it like a weakness. Friends began to drift. Not away from us, from me. Invitations stopped coming. Texts grew shorter. Conversations turned awkward. I found out later she'd been talking. Not venting, curating. Painting herself as the woman suffocating under an insecure husband. A man threatened by her independence. A man who needed reassurance like oxygen. She never mentioned the nights she didn't come home. Or the messages she deleted. Or the way she'd flinch when I touched her arm. Projection is a fascinating thing. It's not just denial, it's preemptive self-defense. If she convinced everyone I was the problem, then she never had to explain herself. The self-sabotage accelerated after that. She started picking fights in public. Correcting me sharply at dinners. Rolling her eyes when I spoke. Once, at a friend's birthday party, she laughed and said, "Daniel gets jealous if I talk to any." Later that night, I sat in my car and didn't turn the engine on for 10 minutes. I wasn't angry yet. I was something colder. I started reviewing our shared finances. At first, it was just curiosity. Then it became clarity. She'd been moving money, small amounts, irregular intervals. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Just enough to avoid attention. Just enough to fund a second life. I didn't confront her. I documented. Screenshots. Statements. Timelines. When you work in finance long enough, you learn that truth doesn't need volume. It needs precision. The final confirmation came by accident. I was home early one afternoon when her tablet chimed. She'd left it on the counter. A message preview lit up the screen. "Can't wait to finally be free." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, the narrative she'd built collapsed under its own weight. The insecure husband. The controlling partner. The jealous man. All of it was scaffolding around a truth she couldn't face. She was already gone. She just wanted me to believe it was my fault. People misunderstand the word replacement. They think it means revenge dating. A rebound. A trophy meant to provoke jealousy. That wasn't what happened. What I replaced wasn't her. It was the version of myself that tolerated being erased. The moment I considered divorce wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors or tearful confessions. It was a Tuesday morning. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my own reflection, when I realized I felt nothing when I imagined her leaving. No panic. No dread. Just relief. That's when I knew. I met with a lawyer the following week. Quiet office. Neutral tones. No judgment. I laid out everything. The finances. The patterns. The documentation. She leaned back in her chair and said, "You've been very thorough." I wanted to understand, I replied. Prepared disclosures. I also reconnected with people she'd edged out of my world. Friends who listened instead of labeling. Colleagues who respected boundaries. Family who didn't ask me to justify my feelings. And then, unexpectedly, I met someone. Her name was Claire. She wasn't flashy. She didn't dominate rooms or weaponize confidence. She listened. She noticed details. She spoke carefully, like words mattered. We met at a charity board meeting I'd postponed attending for years because my wife found it boring. Claire didn't ask why I was quiet. She didn't tell me how to feel. She simply existed without agenda. And in that calm space, something shifted. I didn't tell my wife about her. Not because it was secretive, but because it was irrelevant. By the time my wife noticed the distance, it was already too late. "You're acting different," she said one night. Suspicious. Uneasy. "I am," I replied. She laughed nervously. "What, did you finally decide to stop being insecure?" I looked at her then. Really looked. "No," I said. I decided to stop being dishonest with myself. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. She screamed. She cried. She accused. She called me cold. She called me cruel. She called me unfair. But the loudest moment came at a dinner party she insisted on hosting, determined to prove she was still in control. Friends gathered. Wine flowed. Laughter felt forced. At the end of the night, she stood, glass raised. "I just want to thank everyone," she said, voice trembling slightly, "for supporting me through a very difficult time. When you're married to someone who doesn't believe in you." She paused, eyes flicking toward me. "You learn who your real friends are." I stood too. "I'd like to make a toast," I said calmly. Divorce isn't just paperwork. It's archaeology. Every hidden decision surfaces. Every shortcut demands payment. She lost the house. She lost access to shared investments. She lost credibility. The men she'd been seeing, my supposed replacement, vanished the moment inconvenience arrived. Turns out confidence is attractive until it requires commitment. Friends she'd rallied distanced themselves when details emerged. People don't like realizing they've been lied to, even if the lie made them feel righteous. Her career stalled. Not because of scandal, but because trust eroded quietly. Reputation is currency, and she'd spent hers recklessly. She called me late one night. "You ruined my life," she said. I thought about correcting her. Instead, I said, "No." I stopped subsidizing it. She hung up. I moved forward. Claire and I didn't rush. We built slowly. Intentionally. She never asked me to explain my past. She was too busy respecting my present. The replacement wasn't dramatic. It was sustainable. I saw her once more, a year later, at a mutual acquaintance's event. She looked tired. Polished, but strained. We exchanged nods. Nothing more. Later that night, someone asked me if I regretted how things ended. I thought about the cold lasagna. The accusations. The quiet documentation. "No," I said. "I regret how long I stayed confused. Because insecurity wasn't my problem. It was her excuse. And when excuses collapse, all that's left is consequence." I went home to a life built on clarity. She went home to the echo of a story she could no longer control. And that was the real replacement. The one she never saw coming. This is where the story ends. How was today's story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and where you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories.